I stood there, watching the dark tire tracks etched across the once beautiful soil of my garden, feeling a rush of heat rise in my chest. The image of his car driving through my flower bed replayed over and over in my mind, as if my mind couldn't quite accept the audacity, the cruelty of it all. The man had no regard for anything, least of all the life I had built here, the peace I had tried to cultivate. I had been a fool to think that things could remain calm between us, that my life could be untouched by the chaos he dragged into it. As I moved toward the back of the house, my mind raced, a whirlwind of anger and bitter thoughts spinning faster than I could catch them. Emma. She had always known how to manipulate me, how to pull me back in with just the slightest touch, the faintest whisper. She knew what my weaknesses were, knew exactly how to make me question everything I thought I had figured out. But this was different. This wasn't a simple case of longing or old feelings creeping back. This was an invasion of my privacy, my sanctuary. I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there, letting them tear apart everything I'd worked for. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the overwhelming rush of adrenaline that surged through me. I needed control. I needed to show them that this disrespect wasn't going to be tolerated. I turned and walked back inside, my footsteps heavy on the wooden floors, the creaking of the boards underfoot a constant reminder of how long I had lived in this house, how much I had poured into making it a place of peace. A place that had, for so long, been untouched by the chaos of my past. But now, with him back in the picture, that peace was shattered. I didn't need to think twice. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number I had been avoiding for months. Emma. When she picked up, her voice was cautious, strained. "What is it, Mark?" I clenched my jaw, trying to suppress the fury that surged through me. "You need to tell him to stop." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a brief moment, I thought she might hang up on me. But then, quietly, she spoke. "He didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" I almost shouted into the phone. "He's been tearing through my goddamn garden for weeks now. You tell me how that's not intentional." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I told him to stop. He wouldn't listen." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound filled with venom. "You should have told him a long time ago, Emma. This is ridiculous." I could hear the guilt in her voice. "I know. I'll talk to him." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "You know what, Emma? I'm done. I'm done waiting for you to fix everything. This is your mess. Your choice. Not mine." I ended the call without another word, letting the phone slip from my hand, my grip tightening around it for a moment before I let it fall to the counter. The silence in the house was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing down on me as I stood there. The world outside was still. My garden, where I had poured so much of myself, was now a wasteland. And yet, it wasn't the destruction of my flowers that burned in my chest. It was the realization that this wasn't about the garden at all. This was about something far deeper, far more personal. I wanted to scream, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but instead, I stood there, rooted in place, my mind racing. Had I made the right choices? Had I ever made the right choices with Emma? Or had I simply let her drag me back into a world of lies and deception? I didn't have answers, but I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't stay here anymore. Not in this house, not in this place of broken dreams and crushed expectations. Without thinking, I grabbed my jacket and stormed out of the house. The crisp evening air hit my face as I stepped outside, the cool breeze doing little to calm the storm inside me. I walked toward my car, every step heavy with the weight of my thoughts, and for a moment, I wondered if I should just leave, if I should disappear from this town and never look back. But then, as I looked down at the wreckage of my garden, I realized something. I had no intention of running away from this. I wasn't going to let them think they could destroy me. I wasn't going to let her, or him, think they could walk all over me without consequences. I turned and walked back inside, determination setting in. I wasn't just going to take this lying down. I would find a way to make them feel what I felt. I stood there for a moment, my back pressed against the door, my hand gripping the handle as if I could hold myself together through sheer force of will. The rush of blood pounding in my ears drowned out everything else: the rustling trees, the distant hum of the neighborhood, even the creaking of the floorboards under my feet. I was too consumed by the whirlwind inside me to care about anything else. It wasn't just the damage to my garden, to my home, that had pushed me to the brink. It wasn't just the slow, deliberate erosion of everything I had tried to rebuild since Emma left. It was the way I had let myself fall back into the past with no regard for what it would cost me, no thought to how much farther it would take me into the abyss. I had been a fool to think that I could rise above the wreckage of my own desires, that I could stand in front of her again and feel anything but the raw ache of betrayal. But I had been here before. I had stood on this precipice, this place where the lines blurred between love and hate, where the temptation to throw everything away felt like the only answer. And I had done it again. I couldn't deny the part of me that still wanted her, still needed her, no matter how much I hated myself for it. She had this power over me, this ability to drag me back into the darkness. And I had allowed it to happen. Again. The door creaked open behind me, and I turned instinctively. There she was, Emma, standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes searching mine like she was waiting for something, anything, to explain why I hadn't walked away when I had the chance. She took a step forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mark, please, let's talk about this." I shook my head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Talk? After everything that's happened, now you want to talk?" Her lips trembled as she closed the distance between us, stopping just a few feet away. "I never wanted it to end like this, Mark. You have to believe that." I looked at her then, really looked at her. The woman I had once loved, the woman who had broken me and rebuilt me and broken me again. There was a vulnerability in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. "Not anymore. You have no idea what you've done," I said, my voice cold. "It's too late for apologies, Emma. Too late for anything." Her eyes welled with tears, and she reached out to touch my arm. I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought maybe we could fix it. I thought maybe we could get back to who we were." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had heard them before, hadn't I? The promises. The hope that we could somehow return to the past, that we could fix what was broken. But I was tired. I was so damn tired of fighting a battle that would never end. "Fix it," I repeated bitterly. "Emma, you don't get to fix anything. Not now. Not after everything you've done. This is just a mess." She stepped back, visibly shaken, her eyes now wide with something like fear. "Mark, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done," I replied, my voice hard. "I've had enough of this. Of you. Of him. Of this whole damn situation." Her face fell, the light in her eyes dimming as she took another step back. "You're not serious. You can't be serious." But I was. I had been serious the moment I saw him driving through my garden, the moment I realized that this wasn't about love anymore. It was about control, about me reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The garden, my peace, my life, none of it was something I was willing to let go of again. "I've spent too long pretending," I said, the words spilling out of me before I could stop them. "Pretending like it didn't matter. Pretending like I wasn't still holding on to something that was never meant to be." Emma's expression faltered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she looked at me. "Mark, please. Don't do this. I made a mistake, I know that now. But you can't just give up on us." I shook my head again. "No, Emma. You gave up on us the moment you chose him." I didn't give her a chance to respond. I couldn't. Because if I did, I might give in again, and I couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not when I was so close to finally letting go of the hold she still had on me. I turned and walked out the door, the cool air hitting my face as I stepped outside. My car sat in the driveway, waiting for me. But I wasn't sure where I was going. Didn't matter. All that mattered was that I wasn't going to let her ruin me again. Not this time. I started the engine and pulled away from the house, my heart heavy with something I couldn't quite name. Was it relief? Regret? Anger? Maybe all of it. Maybe none. But one thing was for sure, I wasn't done with this. Not by a long shot. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, the city lights flickering past me in a blur of color, my mind a storm of thoughts. I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that I was only scratching the surface of what had been eating at me for so long. I kept replaying Emma's face, her tear-streaked eyes, the way she'd stood there, so broken, pleading for me to come back. Part of me wanted to give in, to let her have me again, to let her pull me into the comfort of the familiar, the past. But the deeper part of me knew I couldn't. I wouldn't. I pulled into a quiet street, parking near the edge of a park, and sat there, staring out the window. The moonlight illuminated the trees, casting long shadows over the pavement. Everything around me felt still, almost too still, as if the world was holding its breath. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes for a moment, letting the silence wash over me. For the first time in what felt like ages, there was no noise in my head, no swirling anger or sorrow. It was just quiet. I had spent so long trying to make sense of what Emma and I had, what had gone wrong, and how everything had spiraled so out of control. We'd once been in sync, so damn perfect together. I could still remember the way she'd look at me across the room, those eyes full of affection, the way her body fit perfectly with mine. There had been a time when I thought we could conquer anything together, that nothing could tear us apart. But now, looking back, it felt like a distant dream, something I could barely touch, something so far gone that I couldn't even remember why I had believed in it. But then there was him. Her new husband. The man who had come into our lives like a storm, a force I hadn't seen coming. I had been blind to the way he wormed his way into her heart, how he had manipulated her in ways I hadn't wanted to admit. The thought of him, of his smug smile, his cocky attitude, filled me with a rage I couldn't quite control. And now, he was literally driving through the remnants of my life, destroying what little peace I had left. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel, the sharp sound breaking the silence. "I'm not going to let you get away with this," I muttered under my breath, speaking to no one but myself. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I fished it out, expecting another message from Emma, but it wasn't her. It was a text from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. "You don't get to walk away. She belongs with me now." The message was short, simple, and cut deep, like a knife to the gut. But it wasn't from Emma. No, it was from him, her husband. The audacity. The nerve of him. He must have gotten my number from her, or maybe he just assumed that I would be easy to intimidate. But I wasn't going to let him have that power over me. Not now, not ever again. I quickly typed a reply, my fingers moving fast over the screen, the words coming to me in a rush. "She's not yours. She never was." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Almost instantly, a reply popped up. "You think you can stop me? She chose me. You lost her. Move on." I could feel my chest tightening as my pulse raced. This was more than just about Emma. It was about respect. It was about reclaiming what was mine, what was taken from me. There was no way I was going to let him get away with this. I wasn't going to fade into the background of their happy little life, watching as they tore apart everything I had once fought for. I felt a burning desire to do something, anything to make him understand that I wasn't just going to roll over and let him win. The thought of confrontation filled me with a dark, thrilling energy. I could feel my blood pumping faster, my hands shaking slightly as I typed out another message. "You won't win. Not this time." I didn't wait for a response this time. I knew what it would be, another arrogant taunt, another attempt to put me in my place. But I didn't care. I was done with playing by their rules. I had been pushed too far, and now I was ready to fight back, to take control of the situation before it spiraled any further. The night air felt colder as I stepped out of the car, the weight of the phone still in my hand, the words of the message echoing in my mind. I walked toward the park, each step slow and deliberate, the crunch of gravel beneath my boots the only sound. There was something about the quiet of the night that calmed me, made me think more clearly. Maybe it was the distance from everything, from Emma, from him. Maybe it was the clarity I needed to finally see things for what they were. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. And I wasn't going to let him continue destroying what was mine. There was something in me now, something sharp and resolute, a part of me I hadn't known existed until now. I turned back to the car, my mind made up. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next morning, the sun barely rose when I found myself standing in front of my house again, staring at the once pristine garden that had now become a battleground. I could still see the tire tracks imprinted in the soil, each one a reminder of the man who had driven over what I had worked so hard to protect. My hands clenched into fists, my chest tight with frustration. But today was different. Today, I wasn't just reacting. Today, I was taking control. The text from Emma's husband haunted me, but I wasn't going to let it dictate my next move. I had been a fool to let them push me around, to let them tear apart my peace without a fight. But no more. I took a deep breath and walked to the front door, opening it with a sense of purpose. I wasn't going to let Emma's absence cloud my judgment anymore. I wasn't going to let her, anyone, turn me into someone I didn't recognize. I had been a husband, yes, but I was also a man who had a life to reclaim. The door swung open as I stepped outside, determined. As I crossed the yard, a familiar sight caught my eye. His car. The smugness of its presence felt like a slap to my face, a reminder of the man who had been slowly chipping away at everything I held dear. I had known he would show up eventually, but I had underestimated how much anger I would feel seeing him drive into my driveway without permission. The nerve of it! The arrogance! I marched over to the car, my mind racing with thoughts of how far I was willing to go to make this stop. The engine of the car sputtered, and I watched as the man, no more than a shadow behind the tinted windows, stepped out. I could feel the tension rise in my chest. "I knew you'd show up eventually," I called out, my voice low and full of something darker than I wanted to admit. The anger that had been bubbling inside me was spilling over, but this time it didn't feel like weakness. It felt empowering. "What do you think you're doing, driving through my garden? Destroying what's mine?" He smirked, his posture full of that false confidence I had seen in men like him before. "You don't own her anymore, Mark," he said, taking a step toward me. "She's mine now. Move on." Something in me snapped. I had tried for too long to stay composed, to be the better man. But the thought of him taunting me, of him thinking that he had the right to destroy my peace, made my blood run cold. "No," I said, taking a step closer. "You don't get it. You think this is about her, but it's not. This is about you. You think you can just come into my life, tear everything apart, and leave me to pick up the pieces." His confidence faltered for just a second, and that was all I needed. I stepped forward, my voice steady but filled with venom. "No more games. I'm not going to stand by and let you destroy everything I've worked for. You'll leave my property, and you'll never come back." There was a long pause as he stood there, weighing his options. But I saw it in his eyes. He knew I wasn't playing anymore. He knew this time I wouldn't back down. And just like that, the mask of bravado fell away, and he finally saw me for who I truly was. Not someone he could push around, not someone he could walk all over. "You really think you can stop me?" he asked, his voice suddenly less sure of itself. "Not think," I said, my words dripping with finality. "I know. Because I've already started." The air between us thickened, and for a moment, neither of us moved. I could feel the weight of the moment hanging there, like the calm before the storm. But I had no intention of letting things go back to the way they were. This wasn't just about me and Emma. This was about setting a boundary. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity. And I was ready to fight for it. The man glanced at me, his jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. His defeat was already clear. He knew the fight was over. Without another word, he turned and got back into his car. I watched as he pulled away, his tires squealing on the asphalt, and I felt the tension leave my body. It was over. But as I watched him disappear down the street, I realized something even more important. Emma. She was gone. And no matter how much I had hoped, no matter how many times I had tried to make sense of it, she had chosen a different life. And though the wound of that choice would take time to heal, I knew it was a wound I could live with. I wasn't defined by her anymore. I wasn't defined by him either. As I stood there in the silence of my front yard, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The garden would recover. I would recover. I wasn't the man I had been when this all started, and I wasn't going to let anything, least of all him, keep me in the past. I had something more important now. My future. Turning around, I walked back into my house, shutting the door behind me. It was time to rebuild. Time to reclaim what had always been mine. And as the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over everything, I felt hope for the first time in a long while. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning.